Hello everyone, welcome back. So this chapter is blood vessels. We did the chapter on the heart. Now we did the blood before that, and now we're gonna do the blood vessels. This is the cardiovascular system. It has 3 chapters in it. So some of the stuff you'll see we already reviewed in the previous chapter, and some of it will be new. So there are 3 major kinds of blood vessels you have in your body, and some special circuits that exist in human body. So that's what the blood vessels chapter is on. So that's what we're going to discuss. So functions of the blood vessels in cardiovascular system. So the whole function here is to transport things and to exchange things. So here's an example. Can anybody think of what this animal is? It's all wrinkly. It got a big tusk. Almost looks like an elephant, but it's not. So this is a type of marine mammal, and specifically a type of pinniped. In this case, it's a walrus. It's related to sea lions and other relatives. If you look at the color, it's the skin doesn't look natural. It looks, maybe you would think it looked brown or black, but it's bright pink here. And the reason why it's bright pink because it's out of the water and it's overheating. And we said the blood's job is to transport things and exchange. So in this case, it's taking the heat in its core and then taking it and transporting it to the skin, trying to exchange it, trying to get it to cool down. And it doesn't, if it doesn't work, then it's gonna have to jump into the water and let the water do its job, because everything about marine mammals is about staying warm in the cold water. And once they come out of the cold water, they are good at insulating. So if it gets too hot, this is what it's gonna look like. And this is what it looks like in your lungs. You got these bubbly structures known as called alveoli in your lungs, and the blood vessels, they become really, really small. They come into close contact with the alveoli, and that's where the gas exchange happens. So the CO2 and oxygen exchange, and even water is lost through your breathing. This is what it looks like. So this guy here is going to be the capillary. It says capillary. So that's the capillary, and that's showing the gas exchange between the tissues and the capillaries here. This is the arteriole and venule. So I'm going to get to that in a minute, what those are. So capillary is the smallest blood vessel that you have in your body. It's very small. So you got this oxygenated blood that's coming here. This is oxygenated blood, and it's designated as being red, and it's going to go into the capillaries, and that's where they're closest to the cells. And the reason why they are so small, because it gives them lots of surface area. Once the exchange happens here, then the CO2 gets put into the blood, and now you can see the color has changed to blue. So we're going to designate it being blue for deoxygenated blood, meaning it has low oxygen now. It's going to drain. So draining means it's going to leave the muscles, leave the cells, leave the organs, and it's going to go into the veins, and the veins will head back over to the heart, where the whole cycle is going to happen. Whole thing cycles. And I believe last time we talked about 2 circuits. It was a pulmonary circuit, and so basically a circuit is a circular path in which blood is going to go into one of the circuits, and one of them is called pulmonary circuit, and that one is accomplished by the right side of the heart, and that's going to send blood over to the lungs. Notice that the blood here is going to be blue, sending it to the lungs, and once the exchange happens, coming out red. That means it has oxygen now, and it's going to go through the body. So blue blood is going away via the pulmonary trunk. Pulmonary arteries are also blue, but they're bringing, so they're going to the pulmonary trunk and then to the pulmonary artery. So the blue pulmonary artery is going to send the blood over to the lungs, and that's where the purple coloration, you can see that it picks up oxygen. And then once it picks up oxygen, it's bright red. It's going to come back via pulmonary veins. So the vein is red. That's pulmonary, and it's going to dump it back into the heart and the other circuit. So I didn't quite go into this much detail for the systemic circuit. So basically the systemic circuit sends the blood everywhere else in the body. So basically everywhere in the body excluding the lungs. So systemic heart to all other parts of the body. So from the heart to the all other parts of the body. This is a more anatomical version of it, looks like. So this one is not the and so this last one was not as anatomical, but here it's more anatomical. You can see the blood is going to go above the heart here, and then it's going to go ahead and feed your upper limbs, and it's gonna go to your arms, upper limbs, then arms and legs, and your neck, your brain, and part of it is going to go to the heart, below the heart, and that's gonna go down, feed most of your major organs here, and your lower limbs and things of that sort. So that's called the systemic circuit, circulation of blood to parts of the body other than the lungs. So it takes oxygen, oxygenated blood, and distributes it everywhere else in your body because we are considered to be aerobic organisms. We will die if we starve our tissues of oxygen. Therefore, you need to get oxygen to all these tissues, otherwise, they're going to die. So you're going to pick up the waste in your muscles. You're going to have to pick up the CO2 that's building up there in your organs so you can have the waste, and you're going to bring that, transport that back to the lungs, and that's where the exchange is going to happen. And you also drop some waste off, um, in the other parts of the body. So blood is going to go to your kidneys, your liver. It's going to detox, and from there, it's going to head over to your stool, your large intestine, and in your urinary bladder as well. So the waste also goes in the urine. So that's the systemic circuit. It's going to distribute oxygen, nutrients, transport waste to the organs for filtering as well. So like kidneys to the liver. Now this is accomplished by three categories of your blood vessels, and these are going to be the arteries, capillaries, and the veins. So this is what it looks like if you were to take a dye or maybe some latex and inject a cadaver with a chemical, probably latex or something like that. And then you let the chemical harden inside the blood vessels. Then you go ahead and put the cadaver into some type of a chemical that dissolves everything else except the latex. And this is what you're gonna see. This is what it looks like. And if you were try to figure out how long, so if you took all the blood vessels and you stacked them, how long these will be. So if you try to figure that out, your circulatory system, we estimate that it adds up to 60,000 miles of blood vessels inside your body. That's incredible because I believe the diameter of the earth is 30,000 miles. That means you would have to travel twice around the earth in order to see the length of that's the length of your circulatory system in one person. So that's really amazing. You can see clearly that in some places like your brain here and the lungs, they look all red. That means, look how packed they are with the blood vessels. So they're very small, microscopic, and that's the reason why you can get up to 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body. So this image here is showing you the big thing called the artery. So remember, artery is going away from the heart, sending blood away from the heart. Then it splits into arterioles here. And then that's going to split and turn into smallest category, which is the capillaries. And then capillaries are going to have largest surface area. They merge, and then they drain, and then they merge into venules, and then they go into the veins. They merge into veins, and those are going to go to the vena cava. So you got this inferior vena cava, and you have the superior vena cava. This is what the arteries and the veins look like, and you can see if you were to superimpose them, the arteries are deep in the body, and veins, they're basically run parallel to each other. So if you were to superimpose them, the arteries and veins, they basically run parallel to each other. And that's the arteries are designed to be run deep, and the veins are found on the surface. So that's also by design because the arteries are under high pressure and you don't find them on the surface of your skin. But if you look at your back of your hands right now, you're gonna see a lot of veins there. And that's because the veins are under low pressure. If you cut them, they're not going to cause you to bleed to death. So over here, we said the arteries that carry blood away from the heart. So remember A for the arteries, and then away from the heart. That's the definition of it. So the arteries will split and turn into capillaries here. So they turn into capillaries. And then the capillaries are going to be very small vessels. I think I've said that so many times now. And then and this is the histology of it. So this big guy is the artery, and it's going to have thick wall. They're under high pressure. This is the vein, and it's going to have a thinner wall compared to the artery. And these are the capillaries, very small. So let me see. Let me clear the drawing here. So the capillaries are sites of exchange. They connect arteries and the veins carry blood away towards the heart, not away. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. So maybe remember V for visiting veins. They're going to go towards the heart, visit the heart for a little bit, and then leave. Versus the arteries, they're going to go away from the heart. And so these are the definitions for these two. Please do not go by color, because there are arteries that are blue and there are veins that are going to be red. So it is possible for you to have the colors flipped. So try to remember them by definitions and not by colors. So do not go by colors. So going with the theme of cutting into things, organs and structures, we have 3 layers again, and these are going to be called tunics. So they are called tunics. Tunic means layer. And this one, first one is called, that's on the outside, it's called tunica adventia or externa. It's the outermost layer. And then tunic refers to the layer. So if you were to cut into, you got 3 layers, 3 tunics. The outermost layer is called tunica adventia. And going back to this cartoon cross section, so that's the outer layer here. That's the adventia, tunica adventia. Then you have tunica media in the middle. That's the muscle layer. That's made up of muscle. The outer layer is made up of connective tissue, adventia. And then you also have tunica intima. That's going to be made up of endothelium. So again, you got tunica adventia that's made up of connective tissue. Then you got tunica media that's going to be muscle layer. And you got tunica intima on the inside that's going to be made up of endothelium. Endothelium, by the way, is the same thing as epithelium. Epithelium is just on the outside of the things. Endothelium is on the inside. It's the lining on the inside. So that's what it looks like. Here's another picture of it, and this is what it looks like in your textbook. You got 3 categories over here. You have 3 veins categories and 3 arteries. And then you have your capillaries here. So here's basically the vein showing that it has 3 layers. The artery is also showing that it has 3 layers. And that's tunica externa, tunica media, and tunica intima. When we get to the capillaries, you'll notice that's only 1 cell layer thick. So they're very thin. So when you get into capillaries, they only have 1 layer. These are the capillaries. So veins, arteries, venules, arteriole, and then you have the capillaries, which are very, those are only, they're so small that they only have 1 layer of epithelial cells. And that's going to be apparent when you look at the histology. So here you got 3 layers. In the middle, you have muscle layer, and that muscle layer in the arteries is much thicker. So it's much thicker here in the arteries compared to the veins. It's thin. And again, the reason is because arteries are under higher pressure compared to the veins. And then arteries will split into arterioles. These are arterioles. And you start to see they lose layers. They lost the outer layer. Veins, they start to get smaller as well, called the venules. And they start to look different. And the capillaries, I said before, they have only 1, their epithelial cell of endothelium, which is same as the epithelium. So it's 1 cell layer thick. So they're very thin. Here's the histology of it. The artery has really thick muscle layer, and the inside opening is called the lumen. And you can also see the difference in the lumen of a vein. This is a vein, and this is an artery. And look at the muscle layer, it's very thick, and it's very thin in the vein. So that's the histology. And again, the arteries that are trying to keep in the pressure, the blood in the arteries are under high pressure. The other hand, the veins, the muscle layer is much thinner, and that's because the blood in the veins is going to be under low pressure. And then the outer layer is called tunica adventia, and that's going to be made up of connective tissue. And in this case, it's made up of dense irregular CT. So that's the stuff, when you drew um, from your skin in the reticular layer of the experiments. So that's a dense irregular CT. But for the most part, you're going to find the dense irregular CT being on the outer covering, so things like these blood vessels. Tunica media is made up of muscle, and specifically it's going to be smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is involuntary. We don't have direct control over it, versus like skeletal muscle, which we do have control over because those are voluntary. And then on the inside is lining with tunica intima, that's the inside layer, innermost layer, and that's going to be mostly made up of epithelial tissue. That's going to be some aerial CT in there, but most part it's going to be simple squamous epithelium, because capillaries, they're only made up of simple squamous epithelium. So you got really nice setup here for exchange of the materials, and because it's really thin, there's lots of surface area, so the gas exchanges happen very easily, and things like food from intestines and the nutrients they get absorbed or going to your kidneys, waste products get dumped out. So it's due to the fact that epithelial layer is so thin. And simple squamous epithelium is same thing as the endothelium. If you were to go ahead and put this into a chart for comparison between the arteries and the veins, so if you just want to go ahead and just kind of block this, maybe write this down to organize it, you could do that. So the arteries, their walls are much thicker compared to the veins. So that's one difference. And because you're looking at it under the microscope, you're gonna see tubes with thick walls. You saw that here, thick walls versus thin walls. So that's the artery versus the vein under the microscope. And when we dissect our organs, especially things like kidneys, we dissect kidneys, then you're going to come across these tubes, and I can ask you whether you're dissecting if that's an artery or if it's a vein. Sometimes they do put some dyes in those for coloration. You might see some blue and some red in there, but to figure out which one it is, you can that arteries have thicker walls and veins have thinner walls. Then you can go ahead and take the artery or the vein in your hands and almost roll it like a pen. You can roll it between the fingers, and then if you feel thick walls, then it's an artery. And if it's real floppy, like maybe like a straw, plastic straw, then or drinking straw, if it's real floppy, it's going to be a vein. So you can cut into it. When you cut into it, you look at a cross section, and you can see that this is what it's going to look like, the cross section. You're going to see that the arteries have much thicker walls compared to the veins. That's at a gross level. And then the smaller inner diameter, which is, so this inner diameter is smaller and this is bigger, and that's called lumen. And then when you cut into the center of it, the diameter, the center of it allows the blood to flow. So that's going to be much smaller diameter in arteries and much bigger diameter in the veins. So going back, I just showed you how that's different between the two. All right, so where do you find the blood? So only 40% of the blood volume is in the arteries. And that makes sense because diameter is small. The opening in the middle is small. So the lumen is small. So you can see that they can only house so much blood. However, the veins, because the diameter is larger and they're much floppier, you're gonna have 60% more of the 60% or of the blood volume, or a little bit more, can be more too, in the veins at a given time. This can change, for example, if you're crouching or if you're sitting on the ground and you look at something and all of a sudden you stand up. You're gonna feel dizzy, and that's because the blood in your brain rushed away and it's filling the space below. So that means that the system can expand or contract. So that can be reservoir for your blood depending on if you need to, what you're doing. Maybe you're exercising. If you don't need it, you're just sitting around, then the pressure of blood is going to be much higher in the arteries compared to the veins. And then I'll have some charts to show you this in a second. Also, this is a functional reason. This is that there's a reason why you have high blood pressure in the arteries and low blood pressure in the veins. So you have higher pressure in the arteries and then low pressure in the veins. So let's talk about the arteries. Arteries over here, then again, they carry blood away from the heart, and they can carry oxygenated blood, so they can carry deoxygenated blood. You're still calling them arteries if they're carrying the blood away from the heart. They're under very high pressure, so you can see in this picture, if you so they're under very high pressure, and that's the reason why their walls are so thick. Their muscle is thick, so they can hold that pressure in, so they can keep it from exploding. So you can see over here, if you nick aorta or something, that's or carotid artery. So if you were to maybe nick an artery, it is true that your heart will actually squirt it across the room if you were to maybe nick something there. So there's been stories about surgeries where surgeon accidentally nicked an artery and the artery squirts across the room. It squirts blood across the room, and that's the reason because it's under very high pressure. So that's the reason why they have thick walls. So that's the functional reason. So that's a video. I'm gonna come back to this actually. Let me show you the arterioles first. So the arteries will split. When you have an artery, it's going to go away from the heart. It's gonna split, and you're split. Once it splits, it's gonna be called arterioles. First of all, you start with the aorta. Aorta is the largest artery in your body. So when the aorta splits, we call those trunks. When the trunk splits, we call the arteries. And when the arteries split, we call them smaller vessels called arterioles. And when the arterioles split, they become, they go into the capillaries. So it's basically going from a boulevard to a street to an alley where you go into smaller and smaller and smaller space or structure. So eventually you'll split into structures that are so small, we call them capillaries, that are going to be a whole bunch of capillaries. These are the capillaries here. And it's like a fibrous roots of a plant. And they have, because they're so small, they have very high surface area, and very good gas exchange can happen in the capillary beds and also around the arterioles. So arterioles, those are going to have smooth muscle. So leads to capillary beds. And then there is something, when they contract, it's called vasoconstriction. And when they release, it's called vasodilation. So just like your eyes, your pupil, if your pupil is dilated, it's big, so your smooth muscle relaxes, and all of a sudden your blood vessels here, they become dilated if the smooth muscle relaxes. So more blood will go. And so the example would be the walrus I showed you. The walrus is really pink because the blood vessels are dilated. All the blood is going to go in the place where they're dilated to get rid of the heat on the skin, basically. On the other hand, when you're in the cold day and you want to conserve heat, then you have smooth muscle, it constricts, and it's going to go ahead and make these blood vessels small, push the blood away from the area. That's called vasoconstriction. So that's the reason on a cold day, you might feel, your nose feels cold because vasoconstriction is pushing the blood away from the secretions, or your ears might feel cold. It's trying to keep that warm blood into your core. This is a horned lizard. Basically, this is the defense mechanism that it has. So the muscles around the eyes, they start constricting, which creates a high pressure into the arteries that are in the eyes and causes them to basically bleed out. And this is a defense mechanism. It has some other chemicals in it that smell really bad, so it's very unpleasant to the predator. So they use this as a defense mechanism. It has to do with the high pressure. So that's why I put that there. Okay, so this is what a capillary looks like under the microscope. So this is a histology of capillary, and you should be able to tell by this time what type of tissue is around it. So what do you think? Should be what type of tissue is this? So do you think there's muscle or no, it's not muscle. It's actually areolar or CT. So we said the capillaries, and they're only one cell layer thick. So the layer is going to be endothelium. So these are the capillaries. Around it, you have the areolar or CT. So endothelium is going to make this tiny tube, and it's so thin sometimes that it's only one erythrocyte. There's only one erythrocyte that can go through it at a time. So it's going to be there's this white blood cell, and there's only one erythrocyte here that's going to go and travel like this. And you can see how easy it is for a gas exchange to occur because it doesn't have to travel very far. And this here is the muscle tissue. This is muscle tissue. So you should be able to tell what kind of muscle tissue this is. So your choices are smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or skeletal muscle. What type of muscle do you think this is? Is this cardiac? Cardiac has striations. You can see striations, and skeletal has striations. So the other difference between those two is the nucleus is flat for the skeletal and pushed to the side, versus cardiac muscle, they have really big nucleus that's in the middle. Since the nucleus is pushed to the side, this is going to be the skeletal muscle. So here you have this muscle called precapillary sphincters. So they direct the blood flow through the capillary bed. They're small enough for a single red blood cell. So this is talking about the capillaries. They're small enough for single RBC. Precapillary sphincters, that's going to be a circular muscle. That sphincter is going to control the movement of things in or out of the tube. So let's look at that here. So this is your capillary bed. That's your arteriole, and it's going to go into the capillary beds. And there's this sphincter. So it's zoomed in on the sphincter. And that sphincter is going to control the flow of things. So sphincter, this is a cross section here. So smooth muscle, sphincter is made up of smooth muscle. When they squeeze, they're going to shut off the blood flow in the area. So you can have precapillary sphincter. If they're closed down, that means no blood is going to go into the capillaries. And these capillaries are in your skin and tip of your nose, your ears, your fingertips, and you have no blood going into the area. That's how you can control the movement of the blood in your body. If you either need heat or you need to conserve heat. Or you need to get rid of heat, or if you need to conserve heat. So things of that sort. Okay, so here's what I just went through. We said that your arteries are oxygenated, and it's gonna go and split. So let's see. These are your arteries, and they are going to go ahead and split here into arterioles, and then the arterioles go into the capillaries. So this process here, it's called bifurcation. So bifurcation means when something splits into two, just like a tuning fork. So bifurcation means splitting into two. And then when we look here, it's going to have, so this graph is representing surface area. It's going to have basically zero surface area when you start. When you look at total surface area, before it splits, it's very, very low. It's close to zero. And then once it starts splitting, it starts to go up. And then when you have the maximum surface area, which is right here, that's going to be this part here. That's your capillaries. So that's where you have maximum surface area. And then we also have velocity. Velocity is how fast the blood is going. So blood that's leaving from the heart immediately, the speed of the blood is the fastest when it's leaving from the heart. And that's because the heart is pumping. And then it goes further away from the heart. And as it goes further away from the heart, down into your torso, then your lower limbs, it starts splitting off into the capillaries. Now it's going to be in your extremities, your legs and your feet and your arms, depending on your muscles and your fingertips, your toes. So it's going to go down. So it becomes really low, the velocity. Okay, once you go ahead and dump all the oxygen, you pick up the carbon dioxide. And we're going to say now the blood is blue here. It's changing the color. So that's going to be deoxygenated. That's something causing the blood to speed up. So there's something that's causing the blood to speed up again. And I haven't mentioned what that is yet. So basically, once the blood gets to your fingers and then it takes a U-turn, it starts heading back. There's something that's causing it to speed up a little bit, but it's definitely not going as fast as when it left the heart. So the velocity and the speed is still going to be more than when it was in the capillary beds, but it's still less than what it was when it came from the heart. So here you see the surface area is maximum, and then that's where the capillary bed is, and then they start to merge. So let me see, let me do that in a different color. Then they start to merge. So this kind of merges into this. This also merges, and then this merges, and then they go into this one big vessel, the vein. And that goes into the vena cava. So when you get back to the same surface area compared to the arteries, and this merging also has a name, just like splitting was called bifurcation. The merging is called anastomosis. So anastomosis is when vessels, I'm just going to call them vessels, merge. So when blood vessel merges, we say that it has, anastomosis has happened, it has anastomosized, and you get higher velocity, and then you get lower surface area. The surface area started going down here. So you had high surface area, then it started going down, and you had low velocity, then it started going up. So those are some things that are happening. So now we are in veins. So I'm going to tell you what's causing this velocity to go a little bit higher here in a minute. So we have veins now. So the characteristic of the veins compared to the arteries and the capillaries is that veins are visiting. V for visiting. They visit the heart, they go back to the heart, and they have thin walls because they're under low pressure. And you're going to see that they're going to be thin wall. They have valves. So that's something I want you to notice. Because they're under low pressure, they're much slower, and they don't have this thick tunica media. The other thing that's different is, again, they have valves. These valves are really similar to what you find in your heart, and they're present in the veins here, but they're not present in the arteries. Okay. So over here, this is what the valves look like. This is the back of your calf, and you got calf muscle, gastrocnemius. That's the gastrocnemius muscle. And the soleus, you got veins in there. The veins are going to be the valves, and the valves, what they do is they prevent backflow. They prevent blood from going backwards. The gravity wants to pull the blood down. So the gravity wants to pull the blood down. So all this blood, they're trying to prevent it from going in this direction. So it keeps going up in that direction. So the contraction of your muscles is one-way valves. So it doesn't have backflow. The contraction of your skeletal muscles is going to squeeze this blood. So it's going to squeeze the blood vessels. So imagine maybe you have a tube here, and there is blood flowing through the tube. And then something, let's see, squeezes that tube here. The tube got squeezed. It's going to push the blood in this direction, and it's going to push the blood in this direction. So when your muscles, they squeeze these blood vessels in this, and wherever, let's say they squeeze them in the center or something like that, then that's what that's going to do is going to squeeze, and it's going to cause this pinch, and it's going to squish it in this direction and this direction. But in this case, we have these valves, and if the muscles were to squeeze the blood, and we didn't have these valves, then the blood could go, let me change the color again. It could go up, or it could go in this direction. But because we have these valves here that close, prevent the backflow, the blood is only going in this direction. So it's going up. So basically it'll go up at the same time, but if it were to go down and you didn't have these valves, that means you lost a lot of work that you just accomplished. You're trying to get the blood to go back to your heart so it recirculates. That's how you do that. So you go ahead and put a valve there, and then your muscles contract, you squish the blood, and the blood wants to go in both directions, but it stops from going down because you have a valve there. So the only direction can go up, is up. It goes up. So going towards the heart. And we're not constantly exercising, but we are constantly breathing. So as we are breathing all day long, this contraction of our diaphragm and other muscles is pushing against the veins, and these valves are helping to move the blood back to your heart. So we are inhaling, which is breathing. And then this is what explains your increased velocity that I was talking about earlier. So these valves are what are increasing the velocity in this area. So that's what's causing the velocity increase. And basically this is going to be your muscles that are squeezing and pushing the blood up when you're breathing and you're exercising. So this is like an engine that's causing the blood to move back to the heart, and the valves are preventing the backflow. So what happens when they fail, when the valves fail? So that means the blood can go backwards and the gravity wins. So these are called varicose veins, and this is in back of your leg. It can happen if you got failure of these valves. The blood can go backwards and they'll pull over here, and then that's gonna just go, back or down. So what dermatologists or plastic surgeons can do, they can go in there and do surgery and strip them away. So they just take them out because they are redundant blood vessels, or they can insert these chemicals. They have these chemicals. They can put those chemicals and kind of fill them in, and then these can go away. But I heard that's quite painful. All right, so next thing that I want to talk about here, in addition to the pulmonary and systemic circuit, that we have these specialized circuits. That's going to be very specialized pathway that you need to memorize. So we have a couple of them. I'm going to make a different video on that. So I'm just going to name them right for now. So we have the coronary circuit, we have the pulmonary circuit, cerebral arterial circle, and hepatic portal system, and fetal circulation, which is very special. We talked about that a bit. So these are the ones that I'm going to go over in the next video. So I'll make a different video for this. So this lecture will split into 2 parts. So I'm going to stop this one here. Thank you for listening.